You're listening to the Baumbastic Podcast with Andrew Ellis on Inside Arkansas.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Baumbastic Podcast. It is a beautiful Monday, February 3rd. I say beautiful literally every single time. Been very hit or miss here lately on whether or not it is actually a beautiful day. Today, without a doubt, objectively, beautiful day outside. The high of 72. I would enjoy this and appreciate it, but I just know that means that next week when Arkansas opens their season against Washington State, it's going to be about 41 degrees, windy, and just ugly outside. But again, we will enjoy it while it lasts. So we're back. We're happy to be back here, back in the saddle on the Baumbastic Podcast, get back to work. And I've got a very special guest with me here, as you see, Daniel Shi, the best when it comes to really covering every Razorback sport. I mean, baseball, basketball, football, women's basketball, soccer, done some volleyball, done some gymnastics, although I think you're anti-gymnastics these days. But he's a jack of all trades. He's my good buddy. We've had him on the show before. If you don't know him, now you know. You can go follow him there on his Twitter account, as you see below. But Daniel Shi, how are we doing?
Very, very well. And I was glad to fill in while you were frolicking and having a great time in Lexington. Hope that trip was everything and more. And, hey, they won a game. But, we're on the show to talk a different sport. But, happy to fill in.
Yeah, absolutely. I tell you that the Lexington trip definitely went better than I expected. When we booked the trip, it sounded like a great idea. Then as the trip got closer, it started looking like not a great idea, but it ended up being very, very much a fruitful adventure. But as you know, allowed me to not be there for the past weekend of baseball scrimmages. I feel like every year I missed one of the weekends leading up to the season. I remember a couple years ago, Arkansas played Baylor, and I went and covered that, and so I missed it. And so it always kills me when I'm not able to be there at the scrimmages. But I always appreciate you and your coverage. And for those that don't know, and Daniel Shi writes for what's the name? AllHogs is the name of the site. Sorry. The Razorbacks on SI does a really good job of giving just the live play-by-play update. So if you're ever not able to be there out at Baum and you need updates of the scrimmages, she's your guy for sure. And so I was really appreciative of you being out there and giving me those updates so I could kind of stay tapped in and feel like I'm there and live vicariously through you. But overall, you might have seen this baseball team play more than anybody on the planet, besides literally the coaches and players themselves, maybe a select few parents. You've covered this team throughout the entire offseason, of course. This past weekend, you got a little bit of maybe some better weather. Was the weather better this weekend?
Yeah, on Sunday, it definitely was a lot more beautiful. I will say Friday, Saturday, deceptively cold. The press box windows were open for 30 seconds before they were promptly shut. Just because it was, it looked nice outside the whole weekend, but Friday and Saturday, that wind will get you. If you've been out to Baum before at this time of year, that happens. And as Ellis was saying, it's beautiful and probably close to shorts weather, but come February 14th, it might be quite ugly.
Yeah, well, you're an H-Town boy, so you're really not built for the cold weather, not built for the wind, and Baum definitely likes to do that. And we'll get into the ins and outs of some of the position battles, some of the things we saw, but just second weekend as we lead up to the season. We're now, I guess, 11, 12 days away. What are we? How far away? We're less than 2 weeks away from our baseball season. Just overall, just thoughts on the weekend. Did it go about according to schedule or about how you saw it? Did you like what you saw this weekend from the Arkansas Razorbacks?
Yeah, the pitching, especially the guys who went against kind of the backup group, they did very well. So a lot of the starters against kind of the backup group that's not the main starters. I think they got one hit on Saturday, if my memory serves me correctly. It was a double in the first inning by Cam Kozel, promptly picked off, and then pretty much smooth sailing from there. What else? You see some of the guys that really struggled in fall kind of start to come into their own, which is good. People like Michael Anderson, even Cam Kozel got in on some of the action. The pitching battle, which we'll get much more in depth in here in a little bit, both went very well. Gage Wood went 3 innings. Can't remember if it was scoreless. They probably could have thrown him out there for a 4th inning if they wanted to. He threw like 50 pitches, got through 3 innings. Landon Bidelshees got through 3 1/3 and struck out 6. Fastball was 93-94, which is always good. for those kinds of arms. It feels like DVH says that all the time, that every guy could throw 96, 97 if they let them empty it out for a tank. But, sitting 93, 94 for a lot of the starters is kind of where you want to be at this point in the season.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned, we'll definitely start right there with the starting rotation. You mentioned the pitching. It went about according to schedule. And of course, you see on Twitter, you're following, you see all these home runs. You see, Brent Iredale homered twice. Kendall Diggs homered. Nolan Souza homered. And you're kind of like, man, is there a pitching issue? But as you touched on, a lot of that, if you dig through the weeds and you look at your work there, a lot of it was coming against, some freshman arms that were on that other seat. A lot of Arkansas's top arms threw really well. So I felt like going back to last week, leading up to the season, all four of those guys, Gackle, Root, Beidel, and Wood, who we believe are kind of competing for those 3 weekend rotation spots, I thought they all threw pretty well. Like, it went pretty according to schedule. I didn't think there was a ton of separation between any of those 4 guys. I'd say Gackle probably threw the best of them in week 1. And it seems like this week we got a little bit bigger of a sample size, a little bit better. I think they kind of took it up a notch, it seemed. Did you see are we any closer to finding out, hey, who are the top 3 guys? Did you see any separation, if at all? And what did you make of their performance? Did you kind of feel like they upped their game a little bit and are kind of on track to be throwing their best ball as we get into the season?
Definitely. I left Saturday's scrimmage thinking that Gage Wood had set the bar pretty high, and it was going to be pretty difficult because what they've been doing is they had Wood and Beidel kind of throw on back-to-back days, one on Saturday and one on Sunday, and then they would, kind of just let them, battle it out in that sense, because I really do think the last 2 spots are going to be between the 2 of them. I think you need Root's kind of left-handed presence in the starting rotation. So even though I think between the 4 of them, this is probably the second weekend, both weekends, out of the 4 of them, he's probably been the least crisp, if it makes sense. But, 1, I think they need his left-handed presence in the rotation, and 2, I just think that's kind of how Root's going to be. He's not going to overpower hitters like Hagen Smith did last year. So you're going to just have those outings where he goes 5 innings, probably walks 3, strikes out 5, something like that, and just kind of fights his way through 85, 90 pitches. I basically left Saturday's scrimmage thinking that, it was going to be pretty hard to top what Gage Wood did on Saturday, and then Landon Beidel pretty much did that outside of a very long home run given up to Michael Anderson, which, I think he has hit the 2 longest home runs this spring. And, so other than that, he was pretty much unhittable, just threw strikes over the plate, struck out 6, handled the B lineup pretty much how you would expect someone who is going to contribute on the weekend.
Yeah, if anybody's waiting on one of these guys to kind of eliminate themselves, someone to go out there, give up 4 runs or whatever, we just haven't had that moment. Exactly. And I really feel like each guy, you could kind of make a case for has been like, oh, this guy looked really awesome today. I feel like Gackle in week 1 was probably the guy that was the best to me. And then you touched on it there. It seems like Beidel with the 6 strikeouts might have stole the show a little bit. But of course, Gage Wood, you feel pretty good about what he brings to the table. And as we all know, Arkansas plays a 4-game series to open up the season. So we're probably not going to get any clarity on this situation leading into the season. It'll probably be a thing that they don't really have to make a real decision until we go to Arlington. So with the pitching staff, again, we've at least on this show, we've talked a lot about a lot of the options. We feel like Christian Fouch is a pretty safe bet to be a huge contributor there at the back end of the bullpen. You've got some returning veterans in McIntyre and Carter. You've got these talented young guys and Hunter Dietz, who we haven't gotten to see throw yet. Colin Fisher definitely fits that criteria as well. Even some juniors that I think are taking nice strides in Ben Bybee and Parker Coyle. Coyle's looked freaking phenomenal these last couple of weeks. So we kind of know a lot of the suspects, and Razorback fans have seen a lot of these guys throw, and they can make their own kind of opinions and realizations of how they feel about each of them. Do you feel like there are any pitchers on this roster, freshman to senior, whatever, that are maybe flying under the radar just a little bit?
Well, Ross Felder has quite honestly been probably the best relief. Nobody's really starting these scrimmages in a sense. They're just kind of, getting their work in and getting their 3 innings and getting out there for the people that are, in that starting role. But for the people that have come in behind, the 4 starters that we just mentioned, Ross Felder is kind of taking it. I asked DBH extra about, so I actually just ran back in from Swatters Club, that, Colin Fisher we're kind of where we are with Ross Felder, where we are with kind of Colin Fisher last year, where, you get this long roster and there's 8 or 9 freshmen on that list every year, and you're trying to figure out, okay, which one can we kind of eliminate? And I remember going in the fall, like when we were trying to cut Arkansas's roster down from about 51 to 40, it wasn't crazy to think that Felder was one of those spots where it's like, local kid, have a nice, come back in a few years after you tune whatever at JUCO, and, maybe next time, he was definitely on that list, and I look back to see if his fall stats were any good at all, and they weren't. And he's come back, and, the first weekend, didn't he go 2 1/3, something like that?
Yeah, I think 2 1/3 with 4 strikeouts. Didn't give. I mean, he gave a couple little base hits, one of which was an infield. But yeah, he was lights out last weekend, and so he was definitely a guy that I was kind of like, was that just a fluke? Like, did that just kind of happen? And it was against the starting lineup, and so it was cool to see him kind of build on that. But yeah, you're right. Like, he was a guy that coming out of fall, none of us were like, hey, watch out for Ross Felder. Obviously, the 2 freshmen, Gibbler and Wiggins, were the ones that demanded a lot of the headlines. And Gibbler, of course, has not had a great start to the spring, if you will. But yeah, how about Ross Felder, man? Just kind of coming out of nowhere. So what was his outing like? I didn't get to, obviously, I wasn't there. What was his outing like the other day?
I think, very similar. I think 2 clean innings. I think a run scored on him, but it was an unearned run, a little squibber down the first base line that handcuffed, I think it was Pepe down there at first, just rolled down the line, and then single came in behind him and scored. But other than that, yeah, same thing, just threw strikes over the plate. And, DVH, he was on one today in Swatters Club. So if any of you have a Hogs Plus or wherever they post that Swatters thing, I asked him after, I was like, what kind of allows, this kind of thing to happen where every year it seems like there's a freshman that, kind of announces themselves? And he just said, hey, pitching, if you throw strikes, you're gonna pitch. It's not rocket science. He basically said, there's a lot more that goes into position players. You got to run the bases, you got to play defense, you got to do all these things. But if a freshman comes in and throws strikes, which Ross Felder certainly seems like he's capable of doing, you're just gonna have to, you're probably gonna force DVH's hand to throw him. And I'm sure at some point, in the season, you'll see him make a prominent, case that he should at least take a role in some shape or form on the team.
Yeah, I mean, what a story, man. It would be really awesome because, again, he really wasn't like, I'd love to be like, yeah, we all knew. No, we all knew.
Nobody said this was coming, and if they did, they were. I mean, I will say this, and it's not disrespect, because you have to cut numbers. I mean, that's just the math of the game. He was a lot closer to being shown the door than, actually where he is now. And it's just where it is. It's just kind of how it shakes out sometimes.
No, you're 100% right, man. Like, it definitely, if they had, of course, like you said, they have to have some tough conversations. And I mean, when you're a program of this magnitude, of course, the new scholarship rule is going to affect this a little bit, but when you're a program of this magnitude, it's really hard to keep everybody and to really, I mean, just make the roster is tough. And so, yeah, if he hadn't made the roster, the 40-man roster, like, I don't think I really would have batted an eye, but man, it would be a really cool story if someone from Springdale just like kind of emerges seemingly out of nowhere. It would be really awesome. A few other, I want to move over to the position player side just a little bit. So you and I, of course, we interviewed Ryder Helfrich on the Baumbastic podcast last year. Shout out to you for that, because I know you're tight with the Ryder the Helfrich family. You're obviously boys with Leighton as well, and I've covered him, and I know you're a huge fan of his game and his upside as an appreciator of catchers. I really feel like this sophomore class for Arkansas is going to determine how good this team ends up being. Just big picture. I mean, of course, Gabe Gackel is going to likely be your Friday night starter, so no spoiler alert, you're going to need him to be pretty good if you want to compete. And then, of course, I feel like when you look at this lineup, Souza and Helfrich, and you could even really, maybe throw Kojal in there if he ends up being in that mix. Davalon, of course, counts as well. I feel like those are the big X factors where if you can guarantee me all those guys are good, I feel pretty good about this team. If you tell me Davalon, Helfrich, Souza are all going to take that step, Gackel's going to be good, then I don't see any reason why this team can't be great. What's your confidence level like with this sophomore class that those guys are going to have that upward trajectory and are really going to take that next step that many Hog fans have been forecasting for them?
Well, with Ryder, I really think that he will probably be the most improved player on the team from where he was last year to where he is this year, just because he really, outside of a couple of, big time moments, he really struggled freshman year, and he kind of admitted to it as such that, it's just, I think players don't openly admit that, it is a grand stage. It doesn't really matter where you come from in high school or how many of the, perfect game showcases, which I'm sure Ryder played in all of them because he was just that good. And, every school in the country was running after him. But, it certainly did feel like he hit that freshman wall harder than a lot of the other freshmen in the class. But it seems like the Cape really did him a world of good, and he kind of found himself and was able to get at bats instead of really being kind of stuck behind Hudson White for most of the year. And then, DBH called him the best receiver in the country, and he says, he kind of had they kind of have the data to back it up that he's, probably one of the best pitch framers that DBH has ever had, which I think will kind of, he can keep that part of him as he starts catching. I don't think he caught that many innings actually last year.
Mm-hmm.
Hudson White took most of the starts, and he would kind of start on Sundays when, Hudson needed a day off. But, if he can, kind of keep that consistent as he starts catching up more innings, I think you're finally going to see kind of why he was a top 50 recruit in the country. As for the other guys, Ryder and Gabe kind of grew up in that same area, kind of in Northern California. Ryder I think he's still kind of shocked that Gabe actually decided to come to Arkansas. He's that good, and it's like you do. I don't think you kind of get promoted to Friday night starter if you really don't have the stuff for as good as he was his freshman year. It's
Mm-hmm.
very easy to just say that, okay, if it wasn't there, it's very easy to just put him back in the same role that he did last year, and he would still have a huge impact on the team. But he is really, I think, light years ahead of any other option that you would put out there. He's the only one. Outside of there are a few relievers, but I think he's the only one on staff that can kind of maintain his velocity in the high upper 90s for 6-7 innings, and no one else on staff can do that. And you kind of want that if possible in a Friday night guy. And then Nolan is, so the first weekend when you were there, he was kind of the best hitter, probably the best hitter that weekend. Was not very good. He was good on Friday, not so good on Saturday and Sunday. So he still has, a little bit of that. You don't want to overreact to these scrimmages because one day is one day. That equates to like one game. A lot of times less than a game. So like, every player is going to go 4. But, I think he's right up there. And I think both of them are just going to benefit from knowing that they don't have to fight for their spots.
Yeah. So a couple, you mentioned the weekend that was, and you mentioned at the top that Kojal starting to show some signs of life. Because, there were so many Hog fans who had high expectations. People nationally also that viewed Kojal as a massive pickup for Arkansas. Like at the time, I don't think any of us thought that he would kind of being the odd man out of this lineup. But we'll kind of see where it ends up. I'm sure he'll get some starts, but it definitely played out differently than maybe we thought. But you see some signs of life from him. Michael Anderson, who of course had the 2 long home runs. We know he's got power. That's the one thing. Yeah. If there was anything else, we knew he's got some top-notch, top-end, strength and bat speed and some power. Like you said, the 2 longest home runs of the on the team. When you look at those 2 guys, how much better do you feel about them now as we get closer to the season as maybe not being everyday starters, but being dudes that can really help this team as we get closer to the season.
Certainly a lot better about both, because both of them, Anderson and Kozel, that is, did not hit at all in the fall, and it was kind of like, but it kind of feels like DBH is just, he's waiting for a reason to play. Both of them, really. Anderson, I think Anderson is kind of really someone you want over there at first base. He's a lot bigger than all the other first basemen, which doesn't count for nothing, when you're thrown across the diamond, and when you're, and he's the one with the most experience at first base, at least in game action coming into the season. And then you're right that, like, I think it was funny. I was reading Teddy Cahill's athletic top 25 rankings, and they were like the top 2 position players that Arkansas picked up in the transfer portal: Logan Maxwell and Cam Kozel. And so, that's just kind of the potential that Kozel kind of has, where it's like, if you're not looking at it and you're just going off kind of preseason, numbers and accolades beforehand, Cam Kozel is certainly up there. And, I think he, even more than Anderson, I think, Dave's kind of just looking for an excuse to put him in. And if he really starts hitting, especially in this final week, I would not be surprised to see him get a lot of the DH starts, because there is a bit of a logjam in the infield there.
Yeah, and the reality of the situation is, like, we would all love it if it were just as simple as, hey, here are 9 guys. We're gonna play 65 games. These are our guys, and maybe by the end of the year, Arkansas will be at that point. You'd like to, but for the first month of the season, at least, it's going to be a whirlwind. There's going to be probably a different first baseman every day. There's going to be a different DH every day. You might see the outfield shuffle around a little bit. But speaking of the outfield, coming out of last weekend, one of the big questions I had was, I look at this lineup and I look at this roster, and I'm trying to put guys in certain spots and trying to figure out combinations. We didn't get to see Kendall Diggs or Rocco Pepe play the outfield in week 1. And obviously Kendall missed all of the fall, and Pepe was banged up as well, missed a good chunk of the fall. Both of those guys got out there in the outfield this weekend. Now, obviously, I'm not going to ask for your a defensive assessment of them, because a lot of times I hate when people ask me that, or they're like, how does so-and-so look in center field? I'm like, well, they've hit 2 very routine pop-ups to him, and he caught both of them. So do with that what you will, So I'm not going to ask for your defensive assessment, but at least for you, and after you answer this, I want to kind of go through the lineup a little bit, if you'll let me. Sure. But now that you've seen those guys out there in the outfield, and we kind of know, all right, they're real options there in right field, left field, and we've seen obviously both of them play outfield before. Does it kind of maybe change, or at least make you feel a little bit more confident when you're trying to forecast a lineup, knowing, okay, now I know I have that option. I can move Pepe to right. I can move Diggs to right. I can move whoever to left, move so-and-so. Does it help clear up a little bit of your questions when you're thinking about this lineup?
Certainly, and you're right. More people were able to play in the field, and thankfully, both outfielders are fine. Avalon kind of missed some time in the outfield because he tried to make a play and hurt his hamstring a little bit, and he
did make a play. He did make a play.
Yeah. Oh, right, he made that. Sorry. But yes, he's back in left now. So I mean, just any sign of life that he's able to play in the outfield, and it's not long term. I know people like to, it's like you just put in, Maxwell's turn in the order was skipped, and then it rings alarm bells. But Maxwell was able to DH on Sunday after missing, I think he got his turn skipped after about an inning or two on Friday and didn't play Saturday. But yeah, that kind of allowed them to play some new faces. They moved Thomas over to center. He looked pretty good out there as well. And it's one of those things where I just think DBH is probably going to have to live with him being streaky. I mean, every time he talks about Justin Thomas Jr., that's what he says. So yeah, you have, and then Kendall's obviously played outfield for 2-3 years, and hopefully his shoulder's finally, kind of where it needs to be able to do that. But yeah, I mean, there's certainly, I can't guarantee that this outfield is going to be perfect by any means, but it will certainly be I feel fairly confident in, much better than last year where you're not having to move an infielder out there and hope for the best. They also
you're not.
Oh,
No, go
sorry.
ahead.
They also put Cahillo out there
Mhm.
for a little bit because I just think if you wanted to say like one thing that has definitely happened, I think Cahillo is definitely eliminated in that kind of first base logjam. They think that, long term he's a lot better. He is much better used with his arm, in the outfield. He certainly won't start this year. If he starts anywhere, it'll probably be at DH. But but that's like yet another guy where it's like, okay, last year, if you think last year where they really needed a left fielder, if something like that happens, because we really don't know who's going to struggle. I mean, anyway, somebody could be hitting 150 after 3 weeks in the season. They can very easily plug someone in if they need to.
Yeah. And really just offensively, all these guys that we're talking about, I mean, Pepe, Maxwell, Diggs, even Cahillo Aloy, if he ends up being there, even really Davalon to an extent, like offense over defense for the most part. Although I think Davalon and Thomas are, you feel good about them as defenders, but offensively from last year to this year, it should be on paper night and day compared. I don't think you're going to have a Ty Wilmsmeyer, no disrespect. But okay, so I just want to, if you'll bear with me here. I just want to kind of go around the diamond and we'll just kind of reassess where we're at each position. So catcher, we're okay with Ryder Helfrich. Are we good with that?
Yeah.
We good?
Although I will say one quick note. I mean, Zane Becker's
been balling.
He has done, he is kind of, he's kind of doing what Ryder did last year in the fall and in the preseason. We'll kind of see how it, shakes out. He's also. It also just feels like Bobby Werner's just every catcher that he gets his hands on, within a couple of weeks, it's like, okay, he's throwing better, he's framing better, he's blocking pitches better. So that's definitely good to see. And again, it's like, if you're going to, there aren't many catchers, and I will say, like, there aren't many catchers in the SEC that kind of take on a massive offensive role that Ryder may or may not have to, depending on how the rest of the lineup shakes out. So it will help to have somebody that can kind of take a Sunday start if needed, certainly take the midweek starts, those kinds of things. Okay. If we do this for every position, we'll never finish. But
yeah, no, I'm with you. A few of these next ones, like we really don't have to hatch out. But I'm glad you mentioned that about Becker because he has been playing really well. I've been hyping him up for a while, and I'll be honest with you, it's happening way faster than I thought it would have.
Right.
But I think he's definitely solidified himself as kind of that C2. And again, you mentioned Ryder's offense. We talk about DH. Ryder's going to get starts at DH. Like that's 1,000% going to happen. And so I think Becker's development is huge because it allows you to do that. You don't want to have Ryder Helfrich catching 58 games this season. You'd really like to have that number be a lot lower. But okay, third base, Brent Iredale, no discussion. Yeah, he's the third baseman, unless there's an act of God.
He's hitting better. He hit much better this last weekend than the first weekend. So, again, it's just the works of baseball. And he also admitted, it does take a minute for these people to, yes, it is a real thing. This is one of the best staffs in the country. So, yes, even somebody as talented as Iredale, it takes a second. But he's getting there, and he says so as such. So,
yeah. I guess we can give the benefit of the doubt to the guy who hit 440 in the fall or whatever the hell he did. You know what I mean? Like, we'll give him some benefit. But yeah, he's clearly, no doubt about it. Like, he's your starting third baseman. Vahiva, obviously, is your starting shortstop. No debate there. I still feel like Nolan Souza. I mean, I know Cam Kojal, we like the development. I don't think there's any debate. I think Nolan Souza is going to be the everyday second baseman if healthy. Like, all systems go there. Yeah. First base is obviously kind of your first variable, your first wild card where it creates a little bit of a ripple effect because if you put Pepe there, that changes what you do in the outfield. If you put Diggs there, changes what you do in the outfield. If you put Kojal there, it doesn't affect as much. But if you like gun to your head right now, who do you think they would start first game of the year, first base? Would it be Pepe?
Yeah, I think so. Because I think they want his. First of all, I think they want him in the lineup, and then second of all, I just think based on the number of reps they've given them throughout the scrimmages, that I think they would, put him out there at first base and just see what happens. He has made you can tell that like he is still kind of getting used to it as it goes along. I think I think he was the one that first, when the error happened off Felder, where it was just kind of like a little shot down the line and it cuffed him and, rolled all over the wall in right field,
Yeah.
But
well, it's weird about Anderson, because Anderson obviously is another candidate at first base that we have to, especially with the way he's been hitting. You see a guy like Anderson 6'5", and you see the numbers as like a high power, high strikeout guy, and you probably think not much of a defender. He actually might be the best defensive first baseman Arkansas has. And matter of fact, it's not that hard of an argument to make. So it's weird where Anderson's like a very overqualified backup option at first base, or kind of a fallback option. And I think he's definitely going to have some starts there. And the real question is going to be, do they mix in Kojal there? Do they mix in Diggs? Probably not. I agree on your assessment with Kahio Aloy, that I think it probably makes a lot of sense. He came to college as a pitcher, and he threw a ball from right field a couple weeks ago where I was like, oh, wow, I forgot that dude's got an arm. Yeah, I agree. It makes a lot of sense to not have him there at first base. And I don't think he ever was super comfortable there. And again, Reese Robinette's another guy who I like a lot. Doesn't seem like he's in that first base battle at this point. He's been playing third base pretty much the entire offseason. So, okay, the first base is the kind of the weird one where maybe it's Pepe, maybe it's Anderson, maybe Kojal gets a spot start there, and then, DH is kind of with it there as well. Are you still on board with Davalon center field? Because I thought it was very interesting that this was the first time we saw Davalon play anywhere other than center field this past weekend. Maybe that was due to the injury. Maybe he was just kind of working his way back. But I think it does say a lot about what Justin Thomas has accomplished this offseason and kind of forced his hand there. But do you still feel like Davalon's a starting center fielder?
Certainly. I think, I don't know if it's overcorrection from kind of what has happened, the past 2 years, but it certainly feels like with the pitching staff, with the depth of pitching staff that they have, that they're going to make sure that they're not putting so much stress on the pitchers, because the offense is kind of so, I don't want to say poor, but, so it felt like Arkansas had to work for all their runs, especially when we got closer to SEC play. Obviously you're going to have those midweeks where you just win by 10 or 12, just outclassing people. But it certainly feels like this year that, if you're not going to hit, you're not going to play, and so certainly it just feels like Thomas is just too streaky at the plate, although he did hit one out, and that's just kind of how it goes. But yes, Davalon, for my money, is still the starting center.
And I think Davalon's a surefire starter. Like, I don't think there's any debate. If he's not in center, he's starting in left, or starting wherever, or DH or whatever the case may be. I think there's no doubt he's a starter, at least in my opinion. If it were up to me, if we're assuming Pepe is at first base, which may or may not be a safe assumption, my opinion, I feel like that would likely mean Diggs in right field, Logan Maxwell in left field, Davalon in center, and then DH, take whoever you want. That can be Kojal, that can be Anderson, that can be Aloy, that can be Robinette, that can be Thomas, or maybe Maxwell at left field, Thomas, or Maxwell at DH, Thomas in left field, whatever the case may be. But I'm fascinated to see what's going to happen with this outfield, because pretty much every single start or every single game, they've had Thomas in there with the starting group, whether it's center or left. But am I crazy for not quite buying that that's going to be how it plays out?
Yeah, I'm still at least somewhat skeptical, but it's like if you're going to give someone the runway to do this, it feels like Thomas is certainly deserving of his shot to try and do it. I think they know kind of how the other guys can hit. They all have hit at some point at the Division I level at a fairly high clip, and Dave was, making fun of Maxwell, that he was indeed on the TCU team that bludgeoned the crap out of Arkansas in that regional 2 years ago. But yes, all three of them have kind of hit, and Thomas is kind of the only one that hasn't at this rate. So if you're going to give him a shot to kind of prove himself. You want to give him a real shot, and he's done okay with it.
Yeah. And I really do think like you kind of always have the option to move Maxwell or Diggs to DH, move Pepe out there, move Thomas out there. Like I just really like the options that Arkansas has developed here. So it sounds like we're pretty close to the same page with a lot of these moves here. And again, it's fascinating where like there's always kind of conversations leading into the season about, oh, who's going to start here? Who's going to start there? I really don't know if I can remember it coming down to the wire this much where like there's so many different lineup combinations. I did a show last week where I did 4 different lineup combinations, 2 of which were kind of like the all load up on lefties, load up on righties. It's going to be pretty chaotic, like in terms of just the different combinations they throw together. And so it's going to be fascinating. And so I guess, all right, if we're adding it all together, all these conversations we've had, we're going Elfrick catcher, Iredale third, Vahiva short, Souza second, Pepe first, Maxwell left, Diggs right, Davalon center, DH. Who are we going?
Jesus.
Anderson?
Oof.
Actually, weirdly enough, and this is maybe just a personal preference, Baby Aloy is like I just have a soft spot for him.
Yeah, I think he has. I think probably because I mean, the power and just raw like DBH has said this so many times. I'm sure you've mentioned it on the show. Like his exit velocity and just like sweet spot contact is just when he gets one, it's just light years, probably ahead of his brother, really.
Truly, yeah. Like Vahiva's obviously a more consistent, and it's crazy to say this, Vahiva's a more consistent bat to ball. Like he just puts the ball in play a little bit more, and like is better at just kind of making contact here and there. Although he's certainly not scared of a strikeout, doesn't bother him too much. Cajillo is a little bit more all or nothing. Which again, pay attention to what I'm saying, folks. Cajillo is more all or nothing than his brother Vahiva Aloy, who struck out 60 times last year and hit 14 home runs. But again, I agree with kind of that assessment that like the upside is there. I mean, this is a guy that came into college as a pitcher about 15 months ago. He was a relief pitcher at BYU. And now we're talking about a guy who hit 270 in the Big 12 with 8 or 9 home runs. In the fall, there was times in the fall where you were like, this might be the most dynamic hitter in the lineup. And so I also think when you just kind of look at some of these other guys, kind of like you said, you kind of know what you're getting from Maxwell. You know what you're getting from Diggs when he's healthy. You know what you're getting from Davalon. And obviously those guys in the infield you feel pretty good about. I think that kind of builds Arkansas a path to have a high variance guy like Cajillo. You throw him in that 8 or 7, 8, 9 spot. Maybe he hits 235. Maybe he hits 245. But it might be 12 home runs. And of course, you're going to platoon a little bit. You're going to mix in some of those other guys. And again, I think it's going to be kind of a different guy every day. And at the end of the day, like I said, if they really say, hey, Justin Thomas, we're riding with him, he's going to be our starting left fielder every day. Well, then that means Logan Maxwell or Kendall Diggs or Brocco Pepe, one of those guys is going to be an overqualified DH. And so ultimately, I'm not going to lose too much sleep over it, I guess. Before we get out of here, before I let you get back to doing whatever the hell it is Daniel Shi does on a random Monday, I asked Hutch this when he was on the show a couple weeks ago. I asked him, I was like, hey, just give me like your guy, the guy that you really like is like kind of just, you're going to take, he's anytime he has success, we give you credit. And I'm like, hey, that's Hutch's guy. I have to tell you, he chose Davalon, and I know you love Davalon.
Yeah.
So he's off the board. He's already been drafted.
Okay.
And I apologize for that. The French Canadian is not you, which, by the way, actually, give us the correct pronunciation of Arkansas's Florida Gulf Coast transfer.
I forgot to ask him. I'm kicking myself because I talked to him the other day, and I'm working on a long feature. I will certainly ask because this is, I guess, a little exclusive. I can share this. I guess I have an interview tentatively lined up with his parents, so I will make sure to get the act. But I believe, going off the one French interview that I watched that he actually gave in French. It's Shaw Davidon. So, it's not
Shaw.
Well, are you an F1 guy at all?
I am not an F1 guy, but I'm like, I respect it though.
There's Charles Leclerc. It's not Charles Leclerc. So
Shaw the clerk.
It certainly didn't. It certainly doesn't have it certainly isn't Charles, but But I will say also,
not Chuck Davion.
His team does call him Chuck. So
okay.
So I think to avoid controversy until further notice, we'll just go with Chuck.
I'm all on board with that.
If that's what the team calls him, we have to go with it. Official pronunciations be damned.
Dude, I can't wait. I'm gonna pronounce it differently every single time I say his name, unless I talk to him and he says, "Hey, man, quit being an asshole. This is my name."
Right.
Pronounce it right. But let me know when you hear from the parents if there's a because I know, look, and I really don't want to downplay that because pronunciations are real. People deserve to have their name pronounced right. There was actually a controversy in the UFC with this with a French guy. People kept calling him Nasruddin, and it's Nasruddin, and he knocked out Israel Adesanya, and he's like, "Hey, I've been sitting on this for years. Stop calling me Nasruddin." And we're like, "Whoa. Okay, wow." Same with obviously Jared Wagner. We found out mid-April that his name was not Wagner. And I really don't want to make light of stuff like that, especially when you're talking about different backgrounds and stuff like that. I want to be respectful. So I'll be interested to hear what the parents say. But back on track. We're sorry we got sidetracked on the name thing because I knew that would get you going a little bit.
Yes.
You can't have Charles Davion or Shah Davalon. You cannot have them. Who is your guy for this Razorback baseball season? I'll even give you pitchers or lineup. Just your guy. Anytime he does well, we credit Daniel Shi.
Can you give me 10 seconds? I'm kind of going between. I think, and actually, we haven't really discussed him as much, so hopefully this doesn't extend the show another 10 minutes. But I think Razorback fans really should be rooting for Hunter Dietz. I really do. I think he, and it sounds like he's just about there, but DBH said it's more kind of mental with him at this point, which, is difficult when someone comes back from an injury like he did. And, he pitched 2 innings last year, and then they were like, "No, this is not it." But he, this is DVH's line that, outside of Hagen Smith, there wasn't anyone better all fall than Hunter Dietz last year in 2024. And I guess it would have been the fall of 2023. God, that always throws my brain into a pretzel. But, if you think about how hard that pitching staff carried that 2024 team throughout the year, and for Hunter Dietz to be number 2, scrimmage or not, that kind of tells you all you need to know. And I may have to wait 2 months for that pick to amount to anything. But if I can't take the 5'10" center fielder from Montreal, Quebec, Canada, I'll take the, what is he, 6'3", 6'4" guy?
He's a big old donkey. He might even be 6'5". He's a big old lefty, man.
Who can throw 94, 95 when his arm's fully right.
So, okay. One, I love that pick. I think Hunter Dietz is, of course, I think if you were looking at X factors of the pitching staff, there might not be a bigger one where,
right.
You could talk me into him being, a left on left occasional specialist. You could talk me into him being a midweek starter. You could talk me into him being a closer. I think he's got the talent, like you said, to do it all. And hell, if you're going off of the rankings, the draft rankings, the PBR, the perfect game, the whoever, he was rated above Gackle going into last year.
If he was fully healthy, this would be a 5-man rotation race. It really would if he was fully healthy, but he obviously is not. And, I'm not going to even attempt to begin to speculate on what he's fighting right now, mentally, but it just of all the people that because you never want to see someone's, especially a pitcher, his career just completely derailed by injuries. And, he's still got
and for that reason is kind of why I think it just makes a lot of sense for him to be a 8th inning guy, 7th inning guy, a 1 inning, just maybe it's an inning that has 2 lefties, but just like, I think they should simplify his role as much as possible, similar to what they did with Christian Fouch. And I think that's kind of the formula for how they're going to use some of those guys. Sorry to keep lingering on Dietz, but so you get the vibe that he's maybe not going to be ready by opening day?
No, he certainly will not be.
Okay.
DBH was pretty much, he is close, maybe a little bit after that, I think was the direct quote that DBH gave, but certainly he will not be ready opening day. He has not thrown all spring. He probably, my guess is, if you held a gun to my head, he probably wouldn't throw in this upcoming kind of last trio of scrimmages either.
Yeah.
But yes.
Interesting. Yeah, and when you remember, he made his collegiate debut against Tommy White, kind of just getting thrown right into SEC play. So hopefully they're able to get him before something like that. But yeah, we'll continue to monitor that situation. But I love the pick with Hunter Dietz, and I did not plan on us going damn near an hour, but this was good stuff, man. I always love talking ball with you. And again, I really think we're pretty aligned on this. Me, you, and Hutch, really. When I talk to Hutch, like, we're all kind of on the same page of just how we view the team, certain expectations for certain guys, and I think we all kind of agree. Really good pitching staff, deep top to bottom, better than last year's if you go top to bottom, even though we all agree there's not going to be a first team All-American guy like Hagen Smith or a Kevin Cobbs type of thing. And we think the lineup should be better. And so I appreciate our great minds all thinking alike. Danny, I really appreciate you for joining me, man. And any final words to Razorback Nation? Let them know you want to plug any of your work?
Well, we've been doing a lot. I've been doing a lot of kind of, baseball stuff with everybody kind of running off to Lexington. So if you want to, there's some videos and stuff with me. I'm not the best videographer, but there's some videos that you'll find, I think, only on our site. That's si.com/college/Arkansas. You'll figure it out. Sports Illustrated Arkansas, Google, it'll pop up. So yeah, while everyone was out in Lexington having a great time, stimulating the Lexington local economy and the biggest sporting event in over a decade or whatever in Rupp Arena history, stayed behind and made sure that everyone got their baseball fix. So if you want to check that out, it's all there.
Absolutely. Well, appreciate you, Daniel. You're the man, and I look forward to seeing you here at Baum very soon. That's been another great edition of the Baumbastic Podcast. We will catch you guys another day. Woo damn pig.